Let's catch up with New South Wales Education Minister Sarah Mitchell now, because there's a lot happening in education and in New South Wales politics at the moment. Sarah, I've got to give you a question without notice. With this ruling today that Jamie Packer's Crown Casino is unsuitable to hold the casino licence for Barangaroo, this is a massive decision. What happens next? Can the state government still go ahead and provide the licence? Is it up for debate and negotiation? What does the government do?
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously, Chris, as you say, a bit of a question without notice. And for me as Education Minister, obviously my focus is in other areas, not on that. I know that reports came down today, and I'm sure that the Minister's responsible and the Premier will be looking at that and making some decisions. But like I said, it's a bit outside my patch, so I'm probably not the one to be able to answer that one for you.
Well, I would have thought as a Cabinet Minister it's something that would have been a centre of much Cabinet discussion in the past and will be in the future. And I suppose just broadly, what I'd put to you is that Jamie Packer and his company have made this a signature development, not just for them, obviously for them, but for Sydney. It's a massive development, the Barangaroo development, and that tower, I think, is spectacular. What would be the implications? Could there be broader implications for that company and for that development if they weren't able to actually operate the casino on those premises?
Well, look, as I said, Chris, they're the kind of discussions and conversations that, as you allude to, of course, will need to be happening with my Cabinet colleagues who are responsible for those sort of areas. My focus, obviously, is education, but yes, clearly it's something that the government's going to need to be looking at.
All right, well, I just got to say then for our viewers, my understanding, and you can't take this as read at the moment, but my understanding is there is an opportunity for Crown Casino to make some internal changes and changes in personnel and still find a way to get that licence. But this is all going to play out in coming days, and we'll be all over it here on Sky News. Now, in your patch, this is not a question without notice. As Education Minister, you've dealt with the pandemic now for a year. You'll be hoping to have a whole year without homeschooling, with all the kids at school this year. What are your thoughts about pushes from teachers to be at the front of the queue when it comes to getting vaccinations?
Yeah, look, you're so right, Chris. The focus for 2021 is we need to keep the kids in the classroom. We need to manage throughout the pandemic as best as we can, and that's certainly my focus. I think when it comes to the issues around the vaccination that, as you say, the unions have been raising, I mean, clearly we need to have a sensible conversation about this, and the rollout is being managed by the federal government, and we need to look at those who are frontline health workers, those working in the hotel quarantine system, the more vulnerable, and I think that's in line with community expectation. But certainly for me as Education Minister, you know, we had 50 schools last year across the sectors in New South Wales that had to close because of positive COVID cases. While the disruption was minimal, it's still a number of schools that are closed for a day or two, and then staff and potential close contacts for who are students have to stay at home for a couple of weeks. So it is disruptive. You know, 1 in 5 people on any given day are in a school in New South Wales, and I do think there's an argument for, in due course, looking at what we can do to get our teachers vaccinated so we can have that safety and security for our schools and have minimal disruption. But again, these need to be sensible conversations that are taking place. Of course, we've got to protect our health workers, those working in the quarantine system, but I think there is an argument for teachers when it comes to the general public, and that's purely on the basis of the least amount of disruption as possible to the education system.
Yeah, I think a lot of people support, obviously, the elderly, frontline workers and the like being at the front of the queue. But if we just go to this release from one of the education unions, I think it makes the point that you're making there very well, because it says in part that it's not only in the interest of teachers and support staff to receive the vaccination, but also the entire community. It takes just one case of COVID-19 to shut down an entire school, impacting hundreds and sometimes thousands. So that's a good argument why teachers should be very high on the list, because just those infections interrupt not just the education but the lives of so many families. Is there any suggestion that in schools, either government or private, vaccination could be made compulsory by the employers?
Look, Chris, I haven't spoken to a teacher in the last few weeks who doesn't want one as soon as they can get it. And, you know, I'll be lining up when I can, and I think everyone in the community should be as well. The strong recommendation will be, yes, we need to all be vaccinated against this. Again, it is just common sense. This is about not having that disruption to our school communities, as I said, but also the economic benefit or impacts of that. You know, if a parent has to stay at home with their child for a couple of weeks because they're a close contact through school, as you say, the flow-on effect is actually bigger than what's happening in education. So, like I said, all the teachers I'm talking to are very keen to get it. I don't think we'll need to make it compulsory, because I think that they'll do it anyway.
I think you're absolutely right, and that's the right approach. Thanks for joining us, Minister. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks, Chris.
Sarah Mitchell there. We want everybody who needs it to get vaccinated, but I think compulsion is wrong, and I don't think you need it because I think people are sensible anyway.